Birth, Lecture 4. Birth, Lecture 4. We're going to begin with some information from Dannion Brinkley from Secrets of the Light. Dannion had 3 near-death experiences, and he wrote 3 books. This is the final one. He's since passed on, or passed through, either way. And he shares some he teaches some lessons that he's learned that he wants to share with us, hopeful that we will learn and improve on our lives here on the earth. This is to me a profound book. Okay, I am on page 153. We were chosen to come here. This means that a great and infinitely loving force trusts and believes we will achieve the goal we were sent to accomplish. We will do this in the name of what we hold divine. I firmly believe that very few of us will ever fail this part of the life mission. This third lesson from heaven might upset the apple cart for some folks. With an understanding of how and why we were chosen to come here, it becomes evident that the religious concept of humanity being born in sin can simply no longer hold water. Again, I read, I share, you decide. Once again, it reminds me of all that streets of heaven are paved in gold business. I just have to tell you, I know it is not true. Why? I have traveled to heaven and seen everything on the other side of life. Maybe. I return with an abiding knowledge of just how much we are loved and revered over there. Not once was I ever made to feel that I, along with humanity, was sinful or somehow inherently flawed. Never, not even for a single moment, did I sense that we were being viewed as anything less than mighty spiritual beings traveling collectively along a path of growth. To reiterate, the 13 beings enlightened me to the fact that we are indeed considered to be the most courageous heroines and heroes by those who are watching us from the celestial realms. The truth is, we have actually been entrusted with the fate of this world. Please understand this. We bear the great responsibility of transforming the spiritual reality of this physical realm. Why in the world do you think they would have considered giving this enormous task to a bunch of sinners? Unfortunately, no matter how ridiculous the concept of original sin sounds to me, the idea did catch on. And sadly, this born in sin business has contributed to our losing sight of our identity, our dignity, and our divinity. Let me tell you how this whole religious misconception began. The notion of us being born in sin did not come into existence until the Edict of Milan, today known as the Nicene Creed. The year was 325 AD, and the place was Constantinople. The main instigators were Emperor Constantine of the Holy Roman Empire and the reigning Bishop of Rome. Together, these two men conspired to unite the Roman Empire under one official religious perspective. Using a small Hebrew cult known as Christians as their vehicle, they turned the cult's sacred spiritual beliefs into the mandated religion of the Roman Empire. With the creative assistance of the bishop, Emperor Constantine called for a council of 317 bishops to meet in Nicaea, located near what we now call Istanbul. Now, let me just say here, I'm quoting. I don't need a bunch of letters and a bunch of emails and a bunch of hate from Catholics and other people. My purpose is to talk about birth and the very many different views and approaches. And Danian Brinkley certainly has a view that needs to be in the mix. Therefore, I will continue to read. Under the direction of Constantine, the council literally invented a version of the Word of God which more fully meshed with their personal viewpoints and political aspirations. With this revised version of Christianity, Emperor Constantine coerced the empire to embrace the concept of being born in sin, which made all adherents of the new religion subservient to his personal control. This was coupled with the indoctrination of what was about to become the Holy Roman Church. In order to keep true believers captive in a state of strict obedience, the early church relentlessly preached the presence of hell for those who did not conform to the chokehold that religion placed on their lives, and finances a fiery inferno awaited. Without a doubt, existing under that kind of fear and dominance negatively affected their sanity as well. As a result, it created a perversion of goodwill toward other members of the community. The human heart cannot be cruelly coerced by fear of threat, or worse yet, loss of eternal life, and remain unscathed. The maladies that afflicted people during the times of the Roman Empire are quite similar to those affecting modern society today. Due to overbearing governmental controls, citizens hold one another suspect and tend to cocoon instead of reaching out to embrace a sense of community. Open-heartedness is gravely diminished when people are forced to live in an atmosphere of manipulation through demagoguery. Christ said he came to teach a new way and asked that we do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Above all else, he asks us to love one another. These are the spiritual principles each of us have been chosen to express in the world at this time. Just like the Master, we did not come to create a new religion. We were chosen to come here to more fully reflect and express the divine principles of love, compassion, kindness, and good cheer, already innate in our nature. Oh, I'm now on page 176. Before we entered this world in physical form, we were held in the magnificence and protection of the divine womb. This all-embracing experience of safety is a testament to the fact that we are more familiar with this sacred location, the preexistence, the divine womb, than any other place we have ever been. Within the spiritual sanctuary of the world before, we have always been held precious. We are loved and cherished. The universal womb resides beyond any dimensional reality we could possibly find conceivable at this point. It exists at the precipice of all beginnings, standing at the portal to infinity. In our life before life, we are permeated with the energy of spiritual purity. Thereby, our souls are infused with the integrity of divine innocence. In this haven of holiness, we experience our primordial origins of life, while we are bathed in the warmth of eternal truth. Subsequently, we are compelled to expand our consciousness within a framework specifically designed for the universal progression of love and compassion. Our time spent in the cosmic womb is structured to be developmental. In this treasured environment of enlightenment, we do the arduous work of soul excavation. We probe the deepest strata, and I think I've used this in a prior lecture, of our being to bring to light to our most authentic selves. In this way, we come into the realization of our powerfully intimate connection to everything else within the universe. The world before us, the world before is where the blueprint of our spiritual evolution is lovingly fashioned. Every lesson necessary for our soul's growth is scrupulously planned in this divine realm. In the world before this one, our spiritual progress is carefully measured and its advancement meticulously calculated. You know, in many ways, we remain forever connected to this realm, for I believe that when we elect to take on a physical body and life, an aspect of our eternal being stays behind in this realm. And this is one of the reasons why we can communicate with our departed loved ones as well as other dimensions and realities. We do not enter the earth plane without a deliberate course of action. When we choose to leave the universal womb, we enter the physical realm, birth, to actively participate in the execution of the divine plan for spiritual evolution. However, once we cross the veil into the solidified energies of the third dimension, we are granted free will. The choices we make as a result ultimately determine how we arrive at our destiny, a destiny that was decided upon in the world before. Every stage of our spiritual fate is lovingly prepared in order to assist us in the fulfillment of providence, the creation of heaven on earth. This book, The Eternal Journey, I've quoted from it before, by Greg R. Lundahl and Harold A. Widdowson. Again, they're researchers. They've gathered information, they've analyzed it, they share it, and they add their own insights and what they've learned. A couple of paragraphs on page 30. While he was teaching me about the importance of children, he asked me if I would like to see myself before I was born. This is one of the people that they've interviewed and his story. Before I came to earth, and I told them that I would. And it was as if I were looking in a bathroom mirror that was fogged over. I could see myself, but I couldn't distinguish how my hair was done or my facial characteristics attired. Seated in what seemed to be a waiting area, I observed that there were 5 beings around me. 2 of them were in a teaching capacity and were strong spiritual beings, and 3 of them were lesser spiritual beings. They were guardian angels, or whatever, and the 3 lesser ones were there to learn, sort of angels in training. In this premortal environment, I saw that I was making all the decisions for my life, the things that I chose to go through. These were things that I wanted to accomplish in order to learn various lessons. There were different choices available to me. I knew, for example, that I was going to be the oldest of the children in my family. There was a choice between 3 fathers and 2 mothers. I would have learned equal lessons from all of them. I knew that I would have a physical crisis and would be miraculously healed, and I would have a second health crisis, which I would survive. My life on earth could be prolonged, I understood, by living so as to be in a helping capacity, helping others. We'll say much more about choosing life's challenges in the preexistence. I have a few lectures on that topic. Okay, the last one. My editor's note here. Birth, Lecture 5. The 5th lecture on birth is I'll say it. It's sacred to me. It comes from the book The Soul's Remembrance by Roy Mills. And it's awesome. If you're sentimental and emotional like me, get a hanky when you read it. So, Roy Mills again asked God in the preexistence if he could be one on earth to reveal the preexistent part of the plan, and Father told him, yes, you've asked for it, and I will allow you to do it. But you can only do it when I tell you it's time. So sometime in your mortal life, I will let you know that it's time to write a book. And this book is the consequence of that. I think he's in his 40s, but he's allowed to go back and see his pre-existence right up to and including the entering into his mother's womb. Really a very special, tender, and absolutely full of insights. So it's so long that I'm not going to read it all, but I've gone through and marked out some quotes. So we'll get started on page 15. When my pre-birth education was finished and it was time for my mortal birth, my angel guide took me to a very large room, the size of a sports stadium. The interior was radiant and beautiful and looked as if it had been painted with sunlight. Inside were large glowing columns that ran from the floor all the way to the ceiling. My angel guide and I were the only ones in the room at this time. It was called an exit room, or a holding room, the final stop for young spirits who were waiting to come to earth. So he and his angel guide have conversations and talk about his training and his preparation and his excitement, and then another angel becomes a participant in this. Quote, page 16. We walked to the far end of the room and stopped to wait for the angel who would escort me to earth. Excuse me. We continued to talk about the adventure I was about to begin. The more we talked, the more excited I became to embark upon my journey. Then, suddenly, there was a mighty rushing wind, and a door appeared in the wall before us. An angel stepped through the door, which disappeared behind him as quickly as it had materialized. This angel had broad, powerful shoulders. The robe he wore was unlike the ones the other angels had. It looked as if it were made of sheep's wool instead of silk. It was long and hung all the way to his bare feet. The escort had a strong, rugged quality about him, and I knew he was a great warrior angel. Yet, despite his commanding appearance, I felt great love and tenderness radiating from him. Okay, now we're going to skip. Both of the angels, his guide, which is a female, and his escort to the earth, which is a male, have a conversation, and then this happens. The escort angel. We must go at once, the tall angel said. He took hold of my left wrist, and we sailed through the open door to the sound and energy of the same mighty rushing wind I had heard at his arrival. I turned to look back at the angel guide of whom I had grown so fond. She waved and smiled with the same knowing expression. I also saw part of the outside of heaven as I looked back. The walls were covered with layers of pure gold, and a brilliant light shone from the door through which we had come. As we departed, I watched the door vanish, and heaven itself gradually became transparent until it completely disappeared. And now they travel off through space. Quote again, page 19. We continued to descend and came to a stop a few hundred feet above the ground. I asked the angel why we had stopped. He looked toward a house in the distance below us and replied, "To see if your mother is in the house." After he confirmed that she was there, We started downward again, only more slowly this time. When we were about 20 feet above the ground, we stopped, descending, and traveled forward toward the house. My excitement grew. I was about to meet my mother for the first time on earth, and my feelings of separation from heaven fell away. I wanted to go faster, but my escort maintained a steady pace. We hesitated briefly on the front porch. Then we passed right through the wall and went inside. I felt a tiny ping as we went through it, a sensation like having a soap bubble pop on the end of your nose. Inside, I immediately recognized the people in the room from the Life book. The angel told me to go around the room and look carefully at everyone. I was anxious to do so because I was finally getting to see in person these people I had learned so much about. But as I was also growing impatient to meet my mother, I moved from one to the next, taking my time to look closely and thoughtfully. At one point, I started to giggle, partially from excitement and partially because I could see them and they couldn't see me. The angel tells him to be quiet because they might hear him. Then he points out his mother. He watches her, and she's standing at an ironing board, ironing. And I think I will I will read it. He said, "This is your mother." I replied, "Yes, I know. I recognize her voice." While I was in heaven, my angel guide had started using my mother's voice when she spoke, so that I would know it when I was born. She told me this is part of everyone's pre-birth preparation. But as I heard her hum this simple tune, I felt a surge of love inside me. My mother turned her head and looked directly at me, and for a moment I thought she could see me. As I looked into her eyes, I felt the wonder and perfection of God's plan. I would grow in love, and it would start with this beautiful woman. The angel motioned for me to come back to him. Although I had just met her, I was reluctant to leave my mother, but slowly I made my way back to the angel. When I reached him, he looked at me and said in a serious voice, "Are you ready?" I told him I was. He took me back to where my mother was standing and looked down kindly at me again, smiling. Then he gave me a gentle push in her direction. Suddenly, I was inside her. It was a real shock to be instantly living in a physical body, and I lashed out in surprise. I heard my mother tell my grandmother, "I just felt the baby kick." I knew very quickly that my earth life would be very different from heaven. In the spirit world, everything moves smoothly in a calm, sure rhythm. There are no sudden or unexpected movements. Even when my angel escort pushed me toward my mother, it was a graceful movement, more of a glide than anything else. Now I was inside this body where things were moving awkwardly and shifting unexpectedly. It was the most challenging experience I had ever encountered. The heart in my body was beating very fast. The sensation was new to me and difficult to handle. Later in life, I learned that this sensation could be compared to lying on top of a jackhammer. At one point, it shook me so violently that I thought I was going to be thrown back out of my body. Not knowing what to do, I called out to my angel escort and asked him to remove me. There's no way I can stay inside this body the way it's moving, I told him. That is your heart beating. You will get used to it in a little while, he answered. I was not so sure, and I said, can you slow it down or stop it? The angel answered in an amused voice, that is one thing you surely would not want me to do. I still wanted out of my body. I wanted to return to heaven with my escort. Trying to merge my spirit and body was like trying to mix oil and water. They didn't seem to want to be a part of each other. But the angel reassured me that everything would be all right and that I would get used to it. He told me to calm down and direct my thoughts toward my body. I did as he asked and was surprised to have success on the first try. My spirit made contact with the mind in my body, and a complete sharing of information took place. I was amazed that this mind could already function on its own, and that it was so absorbent with the ability to comprehend what I was communicating to it. Once connected with my spirit, this wonderful mind worked with great speed, and it didn't take long before the information exchange was complete. Soon my spirit and my mind merged into one consciousness. My spirit settled completely into my physical body, and the two began to feel and act as one. Now, not only did I have to get used to a body that seemed foreign to me, but I had to adapt to being inside my mother's body as well. However, this came more easily as time passed. When I realized she and I were joined as one, I was very happy. The relationship we shared was a wondrous thing. I could feel the same physical sensation she was feeling. I could also understand her thoughts and feel her emotions. It was even possible for me to see through her eyes if I wanted to. All these things were new to me. Physical sensations, feeling mother's emotions, seeing with mother's eyes, and I didn't always understand what was happening. Although I was no longer in heaven, my angel guide sometimes spoke to me, continuing to teach and to explain the process I was undergoing. She didn't appear to me, but communicated to me telepathically. I could talk to her too, but only if she opened the line of communications by talking to me first. Just had a thought come to my mind. She comforted me when I was frustrated and explained things I'd been doing, I would be doing soon. Our conversations only lasted a short while, but that was okay because I became increasingly happier and more satisfied to be where I was. Then one day I felt myself turning upside down. It was very uncomfortable. I had no idea what was happening, and I felt nervous and anxious. Suddenly I found that my spirit was outside of my mother's body. I was standing next to the escort angel who had brought me to earth. We spoke for a long time, and he tried to calm me down and rid me of my fears, telling me that this was all part of being born. I learned that we are all monitored closely from heaven. especially when we are inside the womb. Whenever we feel anxiety or concern, we are counseled and reassured. This time I was preparing for birth, and my fear brought my escort to calm me. Yet, while he spoke, I had a longing to rejoin my fetal body. I felt a part of it already and wanted to continue my journey. Finally, the escort said, "You have to return to your mother now," and he sent me back into my physical body. I was still upside down, and I still didn't like it. A short time later, I began moving downward and growing ever more upset and uncomfortable. My angel guide had not shown me my actual birth in the life book, so I was quite shocked when I abruptly found that I had left the warmth of my mother and was now for the first time in an environment that felt very cold. A doctor and a nurse were arguing about something. The tones of their voices were loud and harsh, so different from heaven. Then the doctor smacked my bottom, and I gasped a deep breath of air that burned in my chest. I could hear my lungs crackling and felt sharp shooting pains. When I let go of my first breath, I found that I had to take another one. I didn't understand that at all, but I didn't want to experience the pain of my first breath again. But slowly the pain subsided. The nurse cleaned me up with a washcloth before giving me to my mother. The cloth had felt rough and abrasive on my physical body, much different from the gentle spiritual touch I had been used to and the soft security of my mother's womb. After a few minutes, they took me away and laid me in a crib for the night. But I was taken to my mother's room 4 or 5 times a day. And it was there that I felt again the warmth and love of my mother as she held me close and spoke softly to me. Now I could see and smell her and listen to her sing lullabies to me. I was so happy I chose to come to earth. It was 2 or 3 days later that we left the hospital for home. I remember my mother holding me up to see my new home when we arrived there. "This is the house where you're going to live," she said to me. My vision was blurry, but I recognized the house from when the escort angel had brought me there some months earlier. We went inside and everyone gathered around to look at me. My mother laid me on the bed while my grandmama prepared my baby cradle, an old trunk they covered with blankets and surrounded with chairs so I wouldn't roll off and fall on the floor. Gives us lots to think about. Our own births, the births of those who are near and dear to us, and the births of millions upon millions of people that we don't recall who are being born throughout the world. A similar process, I would assume. So that's the last lecture on birth. Very important part of the plan that Father provided for us. That's where we get our body, and now we've got a body. We are going to be tried and tested and become aware, I hope, of the plan that Father has for us personally. So I will get those lectures recorded here soon. Thank you. Again, I just hope you appreciate this sweet, tender love that our Father has for us.